So I'm not sure if anyone can relate to this experience, but I'm hoping you can. Arriving at a place and realizing you don't remember how you got there, or looking down at the clock at the end of the day, seeing that all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock, and what did I even do today? You go home and someone asks you, how was your day? And you genuinely can't remember the things that you did. Time has a weird way of passing us by, especially during the work week, when appointments and work obligations and cleaning and cooking and errands and on can fill our days. Especially when there is so much occupying our minds like there is in our world right now. It's hard to lean into any one thing when there is so much we need to do and so much we need to think about and so many places to be and boxes to check on our to-do lists. I like to refer to Shabbat as the most frequent gift that we receive in Judaism, in part because it aims to disrupt our regular routine. It's a constant. It comes every single week, whether we are prepared or not, whether we choose to engage in it and its related practices or not. Shabbat is referred to as a taste of the world to come, a time to rest, to rejuvenate, and to make the day feel different from the 6 that preceded it. Shabbat is one of the reasons that I enjoyed living in Israel during my year in Israel, because you were forced to engage with it in some way because it is all-encompassing. Friday midday, your physical surroundings change as shops close and the country takes on an all-around slower pace for the next day and a half. In Israel, you can't miss Shabbat, but here in San Francisco, it's very easy to miss Shabbat outside the bounds of our sanctuary. You have to choose to engage with it, as the world around us often views Friday night to Saturday night through very different eyes than Jewish tradition. This week's Torah portion, Behar, really focuses in on the idea of Shabbat, the idea of rest, and the concept of designated time for rest, but from a slightly different approach than what I was describing on the weekly basis. This week, we read Parshat Behar from the middle of the book of Leviticus. It is unusual in that it is primarily just one chapter of the Torah, chapter 25. Behar usually comes in tandem with next week's Torah portion, Bechukotai, but on leap years, like this year, it stands alone. Given its brevity, it's a fairly focused Torah portion, emphasizing really just one topic, instead of a plethora of laws and stories that we usually find ourselves sifting through week to week. In reading Behar this week, this simplicity and focus struck me as just the message that we may need or that I needed in this moment in time. Behar talks about the importance of Shabbat, of rest, through the idea of Shemitah. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Shemitah before. A few. Great. Unlike Shabbat, that comes every single week, Shemitah is a special elongated rest that only comes every 7 years. The words of Behar open, "When you enter the land that I assign you, the land shall observe a Shabbat of Adonai. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Shabbat Shabbaton, a Shabbat of Shabbats, a Shabbat of Adonai. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land." In the Torah, given the agricultural nature of Israelite society, this special Shabbat of Shabbats is primarily about the physical land, the farmland. The Torah teaches us we are to leave the land fallow every 7th year, to let the land breathe, and to give it a rest. Contemporary agriculturalists can tell you that this is an intelligent farming practice. Crops are less successful if the soil is used and used and used and used until every single season passes by. The Torah understood this idea and created the idea of Shemitah, of that rest year, in response. In Hebrew, Shemitah literally means to breathe. Every several years, the Torah teaches us the land needs to breathe. The land needs to rest, to recoup, and to rejuvenate. It needs the time and the space to stop and to just be for an entire year. You can probably see where I'm going with this. It's not just the land that needs that time, it's all of us. We can learn a lot from this lesson in the Torah. Just like the land, we human beings also need to rest. We need to breathe differently and more deeply than we tend to on a daily basis. Not just every 7 years, not just every 7 days, but maybe even every 7 hours or every 7 minutes, depending on what is going on in our lives. So technically, according to historians, the next Shemitah year falls in the Jewish year of 5789, which begins in 4.5 years on September 20th, 2028. Mark your calendars. But controversially, tonight, I am proposing that we should take it as a sign that Bahar and its unique and laser-specific focus on sabbatical rest has a Shabbat unto itself this year on this 3-day weekend. Maybe it's a sign that we all need a sabbatical of sorts for ourselves this summer. I don't know about you, but this particular year, as I encountered Bahar and its focus on rest and sabbatical, I find myself very personally tired, very tired, deeply tired in a different way than I have been before. It's a deep type of tiredness that a good night's sleep or a 3-day weekend, like the one we're about to enter, doesn't quite kick. Not just because I have a toddler or a preschool cold or because I'm pregnant, but because the world around us right now is exhausting. It's hard not to be depressed reading the news day to day or even hour to hour. And it's hard not to wonder if there is a way forward for any of the plethora of issues and conflicts facing our world at the moment. Between wars and encampments and hostages and global warming, terrifying elections, so on and so forth. Simply put, as a society, we are exhausted right now. We need a break. We need a Shemitah. Way back in the day, when I was at HUC in Los Angeles in rabbinical school, a fellow student of mine gave her senior sermon about the idea of rest and sabbaticals that has lingered with me for nearly a decade. In her sermon, Beyond Survival, now Rabbi Dusty Class, now of Seattle, spoke about how even with intentional Shabbat practices and self-care rituals, she found herself in survival mode more often than not, which I'm guessing we can all relate to. With thing after thing piling on, endlessly moving us day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, we can sometimes lift our heads above the fray of daily life to realize just how much time is passing before our eyes. How often we get to 5 o'clock without knowing where the day went, or to each Shabbat not realizing how somehow we've reached yet another weekend in what seemed like an instant. Before her final summer of rabbinical school, Rabbi Class biked from coast to coast with a good friend. She noted, even with Shabbat, even with a personal practice of self-care that I am proud of, even with a phenomenal support network of friends and family, I was so far gone by the time I began my bike ride that summer that it took 2 weeks for me to realize how far gone I had been. It was not until she had disconnected for 2 weeks that she realized how deeply tired her soul was. We need time, she asserted, a spiritual Shemitah, if you will. And intentionally set time in the future for doing whatever it is that will allow your soul not just to return to your body, but to spend some time there. A space in time to lay fallow, to be for the sake of being. Spiritual Shemitah will look different for every person. For Rabbi Class, it was biking across the country that created the space she needed to regain her head and her heart. But her recipe definitely won't work for me, and I'm guessing it won't work for many of you in this room either. The framework for each of our individual spiritual Shemitahs will only come from doing those things that calm your personal head and expand your personal heart, things that are different for each and every one of us. It feels important to acknowledge that there is privilege embedded in the idea of being able to look away, to take a rest, and to try to take a spiritual Shemitah. It's not realistic for everyone, not even everyone here tonight. We may be able to look away from some things, but not from others, to leave some projects for another day, while others we may wish to forget about, demanding our time and attention. Shemitah in the Torah is complete, but that's maybe not possible for us. But my recommendation tonight is to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this case. We should all do what we can. So maybe it's not looking at social media or news headlines after 9 o'clock or on Shabbat, or turning off notifications for your work email or deleting an app for your phone that you know is really going to bother you, going for a walk outside on your lunch break, or leaning into the practice of Shabbat more this weekend or this summer than you usually do. While the Torah may be pretty direct in what a Shabbaton looks like for the land, how we internalize this concept for our own spiritual Shemitahs will be personal and unique. So this 3-day weekend, which is somewhat of its own taste of what's to come for the upcoming summer, I urge all of us to try to find something that feels like a mini spiritual Shemitah for yourself. Think about how you could expand it when you are able to over this next 3 days. Give honor to those who don't have the ability, and maybe think of ways you could help others to do the same thing, so that when you have found the extra rejuvenation or energy that comes with giving yourself a spiritual Shemitah, you have found some time to breathe. Shabbat Shalom.